LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. Do we have some announcements? I don't know. It's the last show of the year, so...
Yeah, at this point. Either way. I'm going to be at a bunch of SANS events next year, both U.S., Europe, you name it. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Subscribe to IT Pro TV.
Yeah, subscribe to IT Pro TV.
Yeah, you should all definitely. IT Pro TV.
Joff, okay, come on now. I'll be at SANS Austin. I will be at SANS... what's the next one? It's in Prague, if I remember correctly. No, I will not be in Prague. I'll be in Amsterdam, Orlando 2017. That's the ones that I can remember off the top of my head.
Sweet. Our special guest for this segment is none other than Kevin Finisterre, Principal Security Consultancy, Digitalmunition. Is that where you are now? You're not there now.
No.
What am I reading?
Digitalmunitions is his perfect personal blog.
Oh, okay.
And he works at Department 13.
13. Yeah, I work for Department 13, a counter UAS company now.
A what company, Kevin?
Counter UAS, the proper term for saying anti-drone, if you will.
Oh, that's fancy.
Okay.
Well,
wait just a second. How come Larry gets to do announcements and I don't? What's up with that?
All right, the top of the next segment, Joff, we will give you ample time to do announcements, I promise.
Okay, back to Kevin.
Back to...
If we think of it.
If we think of it. Back to Kevin. Kevin, welcome to the program this evening. We're a little out of sorts, the last show of the year, and we've been drinking. So it's a perfect time to have you on and talk about smart stuff. So hopefully you can carry the show from this point forward.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do. I know last time we had some technical difficulties, so it's been long overdue to have me back on.
I am so excited you're here, and there are currently no technical difficulties, Kevin, because we want to hear what you have to say, because I love Kevin. Kevin is the man for so many reasons. And I don't know what we talked about last time. You may have been doing some drone stuff last time, but you've been doing, is pretty much your focus today doing drone research, Kevin?
Yeah, actually, your Freudian slip of perfect blog, as it were, is actually great, because I've moved into what I feel is like my perfect job, and a lot of it stemmed from my historic blogging and open sourcing of my work, basically, in full disclosure. And I had moved from doing hardware reverse engineering at Accuvant into a wonderful company that happens to focus on drones. And I've really been able to take my traditional background of penetration testing and hardware security and software security and focus on creating mitigations for drone platforms. So it's really perfect for me, quite honestly.
Hey, Kevin, what's the biggest risk in terms of drones and drone security?
So I guess it depends on which side of the house you're on. If you're a drone vendor, obviously you've got the risk of using your intellectual property, people, copying or cloning parts of your product. And then if you're, on the flip side of a potential drone threat, as it were, it really depends on what your opinion is of your assets and what you may or may not be trying to protect. For example, some people are really sensitive about aerial photography of their property or of their power substations or whatever else. And in other cases, you have people that are military that are dealing with people literally taking off-the-shelf products and dropping grenades on their heads. So the threat really does span a very large chunk of possibility.
Now, Kevin, from what I understand in my question to you recently, that I got to get this out of the way, because in looking at your research and following it in drones, when I fly a drone, it's usually not for very long, because usually it either gets stuck in a tree, lands on a roof, or crashes and goes into a few different, or maybe 100 pieces.
Clearly, you're not flying DJI drones.
Yeah. And so, Kevin, like, how do you become an expert? I mean, certainly in your research, you must be an expert drone flyer, and how have you kind of honed your skills?
So it's funny because a lot of this stuff I learned to fly, the traditional remote control style, maybe before they started calling them drones. I learned before there was auto leveling in a lot of cases, and I learned to be an actual remote control pilot. Now a lot of this stuff is you literally don't have to think very much. They're quote smartphones. They level themselves. They send themselves all over the place with GPS. So it's really I'm pulling out that grumpy old man kind of hat here. Like, my day, we used to fly manually.
Back in my day, you needed to do 10 words a minute Morse code to get your ham radio license.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder why Paul then is still crashing them. But go on.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe it probably is because I fly the drones that like you buy at the drugstore for like $10.99 that probably don't have auto leveling. Is probably my problem.
When I first started doing some drone flying, when I was at the power company out of Knoxville for a couple months, one of my coworkers was a big drone guy, and he says, if you want to learn to fly a drone, you just need to get one of these little teeny ones that are like super impossible to control. Yeah. And you had to use a joystick that was attached to your computer to do the control. And it was like a PlayStation compatible USB joystick. And like that thing crashed more times than it flew. Yeah. And it was super hard to control because of its size. And I'm like, no. No.
Yeah, there's a very small subset of the little drones that are actually easy to control, in my opinion. And, pretty much anything in that novelty class of $100, $200 or less, a lot of times is just junk. Yep. So you really do need to step up into something that actually has a proper set of sensors on it, and somebody actually putting time into, more than basic level code. But yeah, it's there's certainly a wide range of things that may assist you in piloting, and plenty of things that'll just literally help you get in the air and let you crash them and go buy another one.
Yep. Kevin, I thought of you a couple of weeks back when I saw the commercial on TV for the Little Tykes, My First Drone, and I know I tagged you on Facebook on the post when I'm like, what the actual fuck? Like, really?
Now, Kevin, I mean, I've known you for some time, and I know that you've been doing a lot of work in drones, and then in my news feeds, I start seeing all this news about DJI, and they're talking about this researcher has done this work in drones, and there's all this controversy and all these articles, and I'm reading through, and I'm like, oh, that's Kevin. That's Kevin. I'm like, what's going on with poor Kevin? If you care to elaborate and share your side of the story.
Yeah, so a lot of this starts, probably around May or June. I had kind of helped in uncovering some bits and pieces of research on routing DJI's aircraft. Somebody had pointed out that they were Android KitKat based and dropped some little hints on some forums, enough to tease people to let them know that they were routable. And I put literally 3 months of time into, picking up these random tidbits that were laying around and turning them into a proper write-up and an exploit that anybody could use. So shortly after I shared that, there was a very large ramp up in the community for jailbreaking of DJI drones. And that also kind of ran in tandem with some increased concerns around possible data security issues of what those drones collect. The big meme was this drone sending stuff back to China. So I kind of enabled people to dig a little deeper into those questions and provided some research kind of supporting one direction versus the other. In a nutshell, because of that, I feel DJI kind of was reacting to the community that was forming. There was a lot of concerns from the military and other entities about the data privacy aspect. And then additionally, the fact that we were jailbreaking the drones was putting them into a position where they could be modified. Things like their no-fly zones could be bypassed.
See, that was going to be my question. Why would you want to jailbreak them?
I gotcha.
So for example, I live in a no-fly zone. And it took me 2 years to find the number to the airport so that I could actually call the tower and report that I was flying. Like, I went above and beyond my required effort to get a hold of them. I loosely know the airport manager. He's well aware of the fact that I fly and what I do. And usually when I call into the tower, I can almost hear them roll their eyes through the phone. It's like, stop calling. We don't care. Just, you're staying under 400 feet. You're in the same spot you always are, or whatever. Well, when I open up the DJI pilot apps, they bark at me and tell me, you're flying in a Class D airspace. You got to click this and click that and click OK. And I can't get around that limitation unless I actually send DJI my ID and a letter from the airport that says that I'm authorized to fly in my area. And it's just a lot of ridiculous red tape that myself and other people just think isn't necessary. There's been problems with incorrectly drawn no-fly zones, for example. Just any number of things. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that people want to retain that level of control over the drones and the applications that talk to them that enable them to fly. Some of it's basic right to repair, and other people just want to be able to fly where they want to fly and don't want to be managed by a third party.
I think I literally heard Jack's ears perk up at the right to repair comment.
Yeah, but now, Kevin, is there a real, what's the risk to commercial aircraft?
Uh-oh.
Death.
I think Kevin's mic went out.
Stupid.
I clicked the mute button like a fool.
No.
So, I don't know if the information is being suppressed or if people don't actually want to fund proper research, but there's, in my opinion, very few studies that show what actually happens when a drone hits an aircraft. There was one that was put out recently by a Chinese aviation authority that showed a Phantom smacking the windshield of a 747 or something like that. And as I understand, it was simulating, takeoff speeds or something like that. So one of the first questions one of my friends asked was, well, what happens when you're higher up in the air and there's a lot more velocity involved and just many more variables and questions. And unfortunately, I don't think you'll find more than a handful of public papers that get into that stuff.
Yep. This very much reminds me of some of the ways that they were testing aircraft windshields, and one of the test groups was doing bird strike testing, and they were launching chickens, chickens that you'd pick up at the grocery store at the windshields, and the tests were performed in one way by one group, and they drastically failed with another group. And they were trying to figure out between the two groups what was going wrong, and turns out the second group wasn't defrosting the chicken.
Right?
Yeah, it wasn't defrosting the chickens. Yeah.
Now, Kevin, what altitude can your drones and not so not the sub $100-$200 drones, but like what's the max altitude that a drone could conceivably reach?
Conceivably, I think you probably get into how thin is the air and how much thrust can you generate. I don't know the math on that, but the proper answer is I don't fly above 400 feet. But realistically, there's no real technical limitations that prevent you from doing so. In some cases, there is geofencing built into the software that'll prevent you from going above that altitude.
Right.
But really, you're just talking about aerodynamics and, how high up can a 1 pound object generating this much thrust go?
Yep.
Now, DJI makes drones for both commercial uses and military government uses. Is that true?
I don't know that they're not made for government uses, but a lot of government entities do use them for various reasons. My understanding, primarily because they're cheap and they're easy to obtain.
I got you.
But their official application, DJI will staunchly deny any awareness of military groups using their product. And I think they've even gone on to say that they're not aware of people maliciously using their products in some cases.
Interesting.
Now, you discovered a vulnerability and developed an exploit for DJI, or was that more geared towards their usage of Android?
So we've actually the group that I work with, we have a Slack group that's the Dji Reverse Engineering group, and collectively, I think we have about 5 private exploits to obtain root access to the Android subsystem, and they're primarily flaws in DJI's own protocols. They're not necessarily related to the fact that it is an Android platform. They've actually gone to certain lengths to prevent some of the standard Android exploitation methods from working.
Interesting. Now, Kevin, there was a lot of hubbub fairly recently with you and DJI and some bug bounty program issues. What's the whole background as to what happened there?
So
I know,
big sigh.
No, but I think there's lots of value for our listeners.
There's lessons learned
in the story.
So again, back with that line of commentary earlier where I was mentioning, I felt they were being semi-reactionary to some of the things that were going on in public. This bounty program, in my opinion, was a PR attempt to kind of quiet people down and make it look like they were being proactive in doing their due diligence. In reality, they wound up setting up the program very prematurely. They clearly had no clue how bounties were run in the past. And unfortunately, what they did was they put up a web page that basically said, starting today, you can submit bounties to this email address. And these are the things that are considered bounty valid. And it was a very, very short list, literally, a one-line sentence. And so a lot of people, including myself, and admittedly, at the end of the day, if I really want to think about it, I knew better. You don't you don't submit to a bounty that's not really well defined. I think at best I was probably being hopeful. But it was naively stupid of me to submit the bug, without more groundwork laid down on their end, quite honestly. But yeah, so several bugs were submitted by a number of people. I was one of them. And there was probably about a 2-month lag time between the submission and them telling us, hey, give us your bank account, we're going to give you money, and then actually receiving the terms for which we could accept said money. So that was really what started the, I think as they called it in a podcast today, misalignment of expectations between the folks in the bounty program and the bounty hunters.
And what was the bug bounty amount?
They offered me their top bounty, which was $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
And you declined, correct? For what reason?
Yeah, I did. Ultimately, when they sent the terms over, the terms were literally unsignable. I spent some time reviewing them myself. Basic contract law. I mean, any idiot can go on Google and read for pitfalls in contract whatnot. And even some of those basic red flags that everybody knows that you shouldn't do this popped up immediately. One of them off the top of my head was that I couldn't talk negatively about DJI as a company, its employees, executives, or its products. And I right off the bat said, you guys can just go ahead and remove that. I mean, if you want to sue me for saying something you don't like, you can probably use an existing slander law and come at me like that. You don't need this extra level of nonsense that basically ties my hands and prevents me from speaking.
Now, I'm not a lawyer, Kevin, but John Strand and I have talked about previous case law that actually says that's unlawful for a company to prevent individuals from providing negative reviews of product. And again, I mean, check with your lawyer on that, but that's the way I understand it. From reviewing various security products, and John being in a situation with some vendors in that.
Now would be a good time to put a really huge disclaimer on this podcast.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but that's previous conversations we've had on the show, resulting in conversations from people who are lawyers.
Right.
That's what I've learned. But sorry, Kevin, continue.
Yeah, no, there were a number of red flags along those lines, and some of them boiled down to, in my opinion, preventing my right to work. And I know in Ohio specifically, there are some precedents for that, even though they were pushing paperwork to me from San Francisco and in China. Basically, I know that I do have a right to make a living at the end of the day, and I'm not going to sign a piece of paper that in any way, shape, or form jeopardizes my ability to do so. So once I started pushing back on that, we worked through some of the other wording differences that weren't going to work out for me, and ultimately got to a point to where I needed to have a lawyer review the document. And I actually had 4 or 5 different lawyers look at it, and they all pretty well told me the same thing, that in their opinion, it was pretty well written in bad faith, and that it was meant to shut me up. And that if I did sign it, there was a lot of risk for me. Even something as simple as commenting back on an article that DJI published to the press. By me even saying anything back about it, if they thought it was misleading, the wording would have been as such that they could sue me. So I walked. And the reason I ultimately walked wasn't because of the wording itself. I was actually happy to continue working with them through that wording, because it was clear to me that they didn't really understand how bounties work. But not long after I said that I was having my lawyers look at things, I received a CFAA threat letter. And after the fact, they called it a draft, but first of all, who the heck sends a draft threat letter? Like, it doesn't work like that.
I know who sends CFAA draft threat letters. Assholes do. Did I just say that out loud? Wow. Clearly,
So
I need another drink.
Ashtrays send it.
That's right.
Yes. That's what sticks up for me, though. Between the terms themselves, and then the fact that no matter what the terms came down to, they had basically threatened me. I could have paid a lawyer a couple $1,000s to have the terms rewritten, signed, taken that money, and they still could have came after me with the CFAA. So that was the point at which I decided it was best to just kind of share the story with everybody. Even though there were some lawyer privileged emails that were back and forth, I know there's some debatability on whether or not that's enforceable. As far as the footers on the bottom of emails that say this is confidential, blah, 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 blah. But basically the best move in order to protect myself and not immediately spend money was to just walk away and share it all like I did.
And ruin your dreams of a Tesla.
I was gonna say, I really wish I had a Tesla in the driveway, but I don't. I've got my integrity in my back pocket though, which is much more valuable, quite honestly.
Yep. Now, Kevin, did you release the vulnerability publicly after that happened, or is that still sort of under lock and key?
So the PDF that I shared that told the story highlighted the bulk of what the story was. They basically had several developers that left things on GitHub, including SSL keys. They had a wildcard star.dji.com SSL certificate that's valid until March or May of next year, I think. They immediately revoked that. We actually got into some debate. I told them that one of the stipulations of me taking anything from them was that they need to properly disclose the things that we found. And I, in my opinion, thought that they should disclose the fact that their SSL certificate had been sitting on GitHub for a couple of years. Their response was that they were speaking to their lawyers about whether or not they needed to do that. And it's like, okay, guys, we're starting to get into some weird stuff that I'm not comfortable with. And then we found passports and IDs and log files and other fun stuff. And it came to a point to where I wasn't willing to be complicit in their lack of disclosure of a breach, basically.
Right. And now, Kevin, you came about those passports and such because of the fact, in order to obtain deviations from their restricted no-fly zone settings, you had to submit that paperwork to get permission to fly your drone in those areas.
Correct. And the other thing is, if you're an SDK user, there are multiple levels of SDK access, and you have to authenticate yourself in order to get to those higher features of control in the application.
Wait, so wait, hold on, back up. We talk about passports and PII. These were PII of people who were applying to fly their drones. So these are consumers or customers of DJI. Is that correct?
And developers.
Correct. Yep. And there were pretty much any state and any country you can think of. I showed in the PDF that I shared that there were indeed .gov and .mil log files and PII that was available. So it certainly, I'm still surprised at their lack of follow up on what was actually left out, quite honestly.
And this was largely not from their code that was running on their drones, but this was basically a public GitHub.
Yeah. They have about 80 developers that are on GitHub writing production level code, and for some reason, some of those repos were getting flipped into public, and they have to include AWS keys. They actually even screwed up and released their UTM server, which is what they're pitching to the FAA is part of like drone traffic management. The source code to that was just sitting on GitHub, and I got to see the fact that it had SQL injection issues in it, which is awesome.
So now you just name
your
aircraft SQL injection.
How deep does this rabbit hole go? I'm assuming you released what details you were comfortable with in the PDF that you released, right?
Yeah, it was to the see something, say something point. And folks that need to have the information have the information. But beyond that, I don't think I'm going to be sharing anything more than what I've already shared in the PDF. The raw vulnerability itself was literally just their stupidity in both GitHub and the fact that they had public buckets and private bucket keys stored on GitHub. So the funny thing is they actually came back and said that, in their forensic investigation, nobody else had access to the data but one party, which implies me. And I know of at least 5 other people that downloaded it. Some people were coming to our Slack channel about a month before I reported it, downloading stuff off of DJI's public AWS buckets. And they said they had all of the access to the support emails, which had receipts, IDs, people with prop cuts from where they had cut themselves and they were mailing in saying, hey, I cut myself, you guys suck. So there's definitely a lot of data that went floating around, and yeah.
So you're referring to this as a vulnerability, but it's not a vulnerability. It's just poor form, ignorance,
poor
whatever
data
you want to
management.
call it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this last segment, where Bob was saying, people have the potential to do really good things, and they just do boneheaded stuff. So this sounds more like it's in the category of just really boneheaded stuff.
Yeah, this specific thing that got the public attention is definitely just boneheaded stuff. Some of the other things that I'm aware of, I know a guy that reported a SQL injection in like repairs.dji.com, and he chose not to accept his bounty money because of whatever drama they had pushed. I know there was another guy that was, I think he was threatened, if I recall correctly. He found, I think he said, a number of SQL injections in their order processing system and some other stuff like that. And so there's more than just stupidity of somehow not reading all of the Amazon AWS breaches the past 3 years. Somehow not paying attention to the console where it pops up and shows you your buckets are publicly accessible. That was the original vulnerability, but there are also, again, legit vulnerabilities.
Although,
like SQL
on the converse, I may argue that this may in fact be a brilliant way to run a bug bounty program, is that get everybody to submit bugs on this really shaky plan and then threaten to, or offer to give them tons of money for finding the bugs. If you want to accept it, we're going to give you these super strict terms, and or we're going to sue the pants off of you. And which you get the bug submitted, the company gets the bug submitted, and then nobody accepts the money because of these ridiculous terms.
Well,
I think that's giving too much credit.
It's either a brilliant or a never mind.
Well, I think Uber suffered from reputational damage for similar activities. Now, Kevin, I want to turn this into a positive. Obviously, you did not have a very good experience in trying to do the right thing and responsibly disclose these bugs. What advice do you have for those listening today? And I know there's folks out there, we receive email from some of them, and they want advice. They say they've discovered a vulnerability, and they don't know what to do. They're afraid to basically fall into some of the things that you've fallen into, and they're afraid of the repercussions of reporting this vulnerability. What advice do you have for those that are trying to do the right thing but afraid, and how do we help our fellow security researchers?
Yeah, I think the wonderful thing is now there are things in place to kind of help with this stuff, and I'd like to definitely thank the people in these communities for stepping up. But HackerOne, those bug bounty programs, Kate Emo obviously is very involved in that sort of stuff.
At Luda Security. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Bug Crowd. Oddly enough, Bug Crowd even offered to help DJI with their program, and I think they kind of ghosted them on it a little bit. But yeah, I at this point, I would encourage people to use these well-recognized platforms, and I think the resounding bit of information that I heard back from people is, don't try to do your own bug bounty program. Like, go work with somebody that knows what they're doing. And that maybe there are people that are doing them well and not reaching into these community archives and such. But at this point, after this last experience, that would be my suggestion, would be to work with, some well-known entities like that.
Yeah, but Kevin, what if you're a security researcher and you found a vulnerability in a company's product or software that hasn't worked with one of these bug bounty companies? Well, what advice do you have if there are, and I know there's several people sitting on zero-day, exploits and vulnerabilities today that they're for a company that doesn't have is not working with a HackerOne or a Bug Crowd and doesn't have a formal bug bounty program. What advice do you have for them? Do you sit on it?
So we've had that construct in our community for the better part of a decade, and I got out of selling vulnerabilities a number of years ago just because of the nonsense that was involved in a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, you can obviously find bugs in a number of companies' products and find brokers that may buy them. It seems best at this point in time to make sure that you have either your own legal protection that you're comfortable with, or some way of pushing that risk off of yourself, because there's just an inherent level of it associated with doing that type of work. And it's very similar to just disclosing vulnerabilities as well. I mean, if you're going to write about some company's product, at this point, you need to be prepared for them to maybe sue you. It sucks, but that's kind of how I'm jaded on things at this point. Is you just got to be careful.
But it sounds like you should go to maybe CERT or maybe Bugcrowd or HackerOne and say, I know this company isn't working with you, but I found this vulnerability in their stuff. I don't want to disclose it because I don't want to get sued. Can you help me? And that's certainly a path that we recommend. Kevin, would you also recommend that?
Yeah, definitely. And it ultimately, at the end of the day, depends on what your goal is. I mean, if your goal is just educating somebody, I mean, there's the old rainforest puppy policy that, some people don't really agree with, but it's a real good starting point for how you handle common courtesy in the interactions. You mail the security email address. Either they respond or they don't. You give them a fixed amount of time to respond. And if they don't, then just write it up and disclose. So that's kind of the approach that I've used over the years.
Yeah, but they could still sue you should you engage with a legal firm or a lawyer before you engage in this activity today. I agree in the RFP days, right? That might be valid, but I think today people are very kind of sue happy.
Yep. And also,
and that's what I was saying. I don't think that level of risk has changed since those days. I think it has maintained the same. And I kind of long ago went with that mentality of, if I'm going to get sued, then I'm going to get sued. I'll deal with it whenever. I would rather personally push out the education around the vulnerability or the risk, and that's just the cost of doing business for me, is I might get sued. That's not the path that everybody should take. So you really need to understand that risk before you head into the path of vulnerability equity, basically.
Yep.
There is
ahead,
a team at the FBI, and I know that takes a leap of faith to deal with the FBI these days, but they actually work with the EFF too. So if you have something particularly that involves public safety or something, it might be worth reaching out to the EFF to talk to them about talking to the FBI and doing some butt covering. And also, if you as an independent researcher, or even with a big company, reach out to an organization that has no clue about vulnerabilities, they may not take you seriously. If they get an email from an ic.fbi.gov email account, they are more likely to pay attention and less likely to threaten you. But still, like I said, EFF has actual lawyers, so they're an option for you too.
Yeah, it's a great point, Jack. And my personal feeling, and Kevin, I want to get your take on this, is that if you do find a vulnerability, especially as Jack says with public safety, I feel like your motive should be to do the right thing and make sure that it gets fixed rather than to make some money off of it. However, I understand you might have spent a lot of time and resources in finding this vulnerability and want to get paid for it. I think if that's your motive, you should go to a Bugcrowd or HackerOne and really just participate in their bug bounties and make money, make a living at it. And that's I'm totally cool with that. But if you do stumble across something that is a public safety issue, I feel like if your motive is just to make sure that they fix it, that there are resources out there to help you. Would you agree with that assessment, Kevin?
Most definitely. And I would certainly say that I would have qualms about holding on to vulnerabilities that were safety critical with the hopes that you would get that doesn't fit into my general moral footprint.
Moral compass.
Definitely there.
Yep. And that said, I don't think the bug bounty programs are perfect.
No.
My personal experience with a bug bounty program through HackerOne recently was that there's a product that I use at work. There's a product we use here at the podcast. In fact, we may have been distracted by it a little bit earlier because of wet Asians and such. But I reported a information disclosure bug to them, and they said, "Yep, nope, not a thing." And I'm like, I don't even care if there's money involved. It was, if there was a $40 bug bounty involved, then change the screen, please?
Sorry.
Sorry,
Yes,
I can
very
go
distracting.
No, I'm no. If there was $40 involved, I was going to go donate to that to Hackers for Charity, or know what, or buy drinks at the bar at DEF CON for whoever was there, type of thing. It wasn't like I was going to. Oh my God, I'm going to make. I'm not going to get my Tesla out of it because it wasn't that big of a deal. But the fact that I went and reported it, and they said, "Yeah, no, that's not an information disclosure vulnerability. We don't care about that." And 2 days later, it was fixed.
Well,
That really grinds my gears.
But the outcome was for the benefit.
Ultimately, it was.
So, may I ask a question?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Jeff.
go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I was out of the industry for a while, coming back to it a couple years ago, and somewhere in between, this thing bug bounty came about, and I could do the homework, and I'm just being lazy. But I'm curious as to, back in the early days, it was more a matter of sort of bragging rights and who, it was a matter of prestige to be able to say that you had discovered a vulnerability, and, you got a cert. Back in those days, it was more like a cert advisory or something, some other way of notoriety. So I'm just curious, in the form of a question, this whole notion of a bug bounty program, I think I understand the motivation for why they came about. Maybe I should talk to Katie Moe about this and get a little history lesson. But it sounds almost like it's the devil if you do, the devil if you don't. That the bug bounty brings out sort of the greed factor, or it's not so much the notoriety anymore. It's you want to get paid, you want to make some money. I'm just curious about what the dynamics are of the motivations of why, in the old days it was just, hey, I've discovered a vulnerability, I want to share it with people. And the question in the early days was the responsible disclosure because of letting the bad guys know that there was a problem, versus what seems today to be much more of a sort of philosophical question of whether you're going to get paid or not. Am I missing something, or somebody enlighten me?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because if you have a chance to look at the PDF when I wrote up kind of why I wasn't going to take DJI's bounty money, one of the things that was included was my first email to them when I submitted the bounty. And one of the first things that I said to them was what was most important to me was my ability to share what I found and write about it, and what I called my right to disclose. And I think that was one of the fundamental differences that we had. They actually wanted to control that narrative fully. And they had even asked me at one point, they wanted me to give them 180 days before I disclosed anything, which was a little long in my opinion. But on top of that, they wanted me to give them 15 days notice before I disclosed anything, and it was subject to their prior approval. So that was one of those, literally, it was, do you want to be able to share this, or do you want the money? And for me, it was, I quite honestly think it was ridiculous. They offered me $30,000 for finding the fact that they, had AWS keys out. I mean, if they want to give it to me, sure, I'll take it. But I want to be clear that I did not expect that at all. But at the end of the day, not being able to share what those missteps were and share my opinion about them and associate the find with myself, it was another reason why it wasn't worth accepting the bounty, if that makes sense.
But Kevin, that's to me, that's not a bounty. That's a, hey, Kevin, here's $30,000. Thank you for what you've done, but we want you to keep quiet. That's more like hush money than it is a bug bounty compensating you for your time and effort.
Yep, and I try not to step on those, stepping on their definition of bounty too much. But there was a point in time in during the negotiations, they, one of the representatives said to me, maybe we can give you a little bit more money to keep this confidential.
Yeah.
And I actually started laughing, and I was like, "Dude, do you know what you just said to me? Like, I literally, I don't want your hush buddy. Like,
Yeah,
no."
that's okay. So we get. So what, Kevin? What advice do you have for companies that are doing a bug bounty? What's the lessons learned for companies that are doing a bug bounty? I think the resounding thing we've heard is work with HackerOne, work with BugCrowd. But are there other things?
Don't fuck it up. Oh, sorry.
So I think the biggest thing that was a problem at DJI was there was some sort of disconnect from whoever was higher up at corporate in China and the people that were lower on the ground, possibly in the engineering team, maybe the PR marketing team. They were not in sync with each other for whatever reason. And the people on the public face, those folks that were writing the pieces that wound up in the news, made it seem like a very welcoming program that they wanted help with. Whereas the message that came down from the top was basically, you will tell us about security issues and you will shut up about it. So certainly would encourage to make sure that your departments are in sync with the messaging before you begin into a program.
I think this reminds me a lot of many conversations I've had with sales people over the years, where I think it sounds like there's a basic disconnect between parties because lawyers and business people, I think, and maybe this is a byproduct of the bug bounty program or a necessary part of it or an unintended consequence, but when you start talking about money and financial motivation, there's a certain element of people that's what they're attuned to, where I've had many conversations with salespeople over the year where I've talked about, I just want to help the customer out because it's the right thing to do. And they're kind of like, but where's the profit in that? Where's the money in that? So, and that's, I'm implying that one's better than the other, but if in the attempt to be objective, I think it's more a matter of, people are just coming at this from a different point of view. And I think there needs to be a sensitivity to not everybody is motivated just by making a buck. There's other more altruistic reasons why people do what they do, hopefully. And hopefully that's pervasive in our community, but I'm sure there's exceptions.
Kevin, where does it stand today with DJI in this whole situation?
There are a couple of folks that I kind of talk to candidly via more back alley unofficial communication means, but there's been no official response. Literally 2 days before I published that information, I mailed them and was like, "What the? Like, I can't believe you guys actually came at me like that. Are you serious? Like, maybe you want to apologize to me and I read this wrong." And just so you know, I'm one last time trying to talk to my lawyers to see if we can salvage this document, and they didn't even respond at all. And what they wound up doing instead was they pushed out commentary via the standard news PR wires. So they wrote up an article basically saying how I was a big mean hacker and tried to push it out to the press. And the funny thing is while they were in the middle of doing that, I was just finishing up the paper that I wrote. So several press outlets covered my side of the story, and then they wound up commenting on the bottom of some of those articles. So literally, apart from efforts to discredit me, I've had no official commentary from them, no apology, no nothing. It's just Kevin really doesn't exist, basically, and don't mention. It's like I'm Voldemort. Even in the articles, they started calling me the hacker in question, and nobody wanted to say Kevin Finisterre for a while.
Kevin Finisterre. Ah.
Kevin, are you continuing your research into DJI products?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, there's a large component of that work that just goes hand in hand with working for a counter UAS company.
Yep.
DJI is probably the number one product worldwide that people consider to be a threat for various reasons. So I'll always be working on their products because of that. Today, however, just to get a little breath of fresh air on research, I went and bought a GoPro Karma.
Nice.
So
Now,
you spent
yeah.
my Christmas break taking that apart.
Along those lines, Kevin, have other drone companies come to you and said, "Hey, please help us"?
Oh yeah, I've
Good.
actually
So glad to
I've
hear
definitely
that.
worked with some other companies.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And hopefully they've looked at this whole situation and looked at it in a not that it takes much effort, but been a better partner than DJI. Not that that's saying much. With you to make their products better.
I got a lot of flack for beating up on 3D robotics over the past couple of years. And there's actually been a number of people at 3D Robotics that reached out to me and spent time and effort trying to understand what my message was and incorporating some of those changes into the product and whatnot. So yeah, people definitely reached out. And everybody knows I'm a troll, but there's usually an underlying legit message that goes along with it. So if you're willing to chip in a little bit, you might learn something.
Yeah, so,
you're a troll with good intentions, and it's encouraging to me, Kevin, that other drone companies are more willing to work with you in a positive manner to make their products more resilient, because it just benefits everyone in the community.
and I think you probably are pretty much already answered it. But how does the work feel all about all this?
So my boss tells me very frequently, literally, Kevin, I don't ever seek to censor you. I'm definitely made aware of the things that are touchy and whatnot. I think the only thing that has really come up at work is literally coincidentally in tandem with me releasing the bounty information. I had a paper on remote drone identification, also known as drone ID, that had been caught up by our tech writer trying to correct my hood speak basically and make it a presentable paper. It came out the same day, and it was my technical critique of DJI's implementation of this drone ID platform. Well, rather than refuting the claims that I made technically, they decided to put out snarky commentary saying that I probably wrote the article because I was mad that my company's stock price sucked.
Oh, God damn.
Yeah, they literally put a PR release out that says Kevin Finistaire's mad and his company's stock price has dropped 20% since we put out our product, blah, blah, blah. So beyond that, and them,
you mean the product that they put out that all their source code was on GitHub for?
No comment.
I didn't expect one. I didn't expect one. That's why I made it.
Beyond that, generally speaking, a lot of what I do for my personal hobby overlaps with what I do in my 40-hour-a-week work day job stuff. So there's some benefit from the fact that I burn the candle at both ends, and I'm probably going to be hacking on drone products whether or not I'm on the clock, one way or the other. So generally speaking, my research and my work is all very held in a positive light at work. And the only thing that I've really caught flack over was this indirect attack on the stock price, so to speak.
I'm glad your employer was supportive, Kevin, because we love you and your intentions are good. And we knew that before we'd read anything that happened with this event. I knew your intentions were good, and I'm glad you were able to come on the show today and share your side of the story.
Thanks, man. And I'm lucky in that regard. I actually got contacted by somebody this past week, and I'm in the process of verifying the story. But this gentleman says he used to be a DJI dealer, and he reported a bug in their couponing system that allowed him to double the price of any coupon. And he wound up buying a bunch of extra drones at this double discounted price. And he spent some time reporting this bug to DJI and working with them to fix it, at which point he got frustrated and they called the police on him and called him a hacker. Jeez. So he spent 5 days in jail because DJI accused him of hacking their systems. And he ultimately wound up getting out because they weren't able to provide additional evidence. So, I'm lucky, like you and a lot of people know my good intentions, but if those PR articles would have hit before my example, it could have been a completely different story in the news. So Yeah, just luck and thank you guys.
Kevin, before we go, I want you to play 5 questions with Security Weekly because I don't think we did this last time you were on the show.
I think we did actually because I remember one of my answers.
But we're going to do it again.
All right,
If
you know what?
remember
We'll do it
perfect.
again. How about that?
Let's do it.
Should play 5 questions with Security Weekly.
It's
No!
Paul's show.
Last time you were
Do
on
what
the
he
show.
says.
Wow.
Actually, because I remember one of my answers.
But we're going to do it
He
again.
doesn't want to
You know
do
what? We'll
it.
do it again. How about that?
We're waiting
I
for
feel
the...
like we're on an episode of Star Trek or something and we're stuck in a loop.
We're in the time.
It could-
We're at the
Deja vu.
vortex.
That's when the Matrix changes.
Actually, because I remember one of my answers.
But we're going to do it
He
again.
doesn't
Make
wanna
it
do
so.
Oh my God!
These are not the
I
answers
feel-
that you
I
said
feel like we're
before.
on an episode of Star Trek or something. What is going on?
We're in the time.
Remember that thing about technical difficulties? That's when the
Make it
Matrix
so.
changes.
We need a tachyon pulse because we're stuck in a time warp continuum. Kevin, you know what? 3 words to describe yourself.
Uh-oh.
Master drone hacker.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go with a drone with a chainsaw on the front of it.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Pimpin' ain't easy.
I think that was your answer last time. Now it's all coming in the
Now
popular
it comes back to
in the
Paul.
popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby. Do you prefer to go first or second?
You can grab up on it, Paul. It's all good.
Told you I like to be grabbed. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Ooh, Biggie and Heather Graham.
Oh, damn.
Kevin, thank you so much for reappearing on this episode of Security Weekly, and we're glad you're on our side.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, talk about the security news for this week. Stay tuned.